Welcome to the Boomer Woman's Podcast. I'm your host, Agnes Knowles. My guest today is a financial advisor whose firm prioritizes the financial needs and aspirations of women. Wes is smart and well spoken, but I need to introduce him by first saying he has a great sense of humor. Tech failed us right from the get go, so he jumped over to Zoom and logged in several times so we could complete our conversation. I haven't used Zoom for ages, so it's a little bit glitchy in spots, but we have fun, and I hope you'll stay for that. He has great insights into the mindset a woman brings to financial planning and great advice on how to prepare for retirement, whatever that might look like. This is also my last interview of the year. It sounds cliche, but these last few months have flown by. Next week, I'll wrap up this fifth season of the Boomer Woman's Podcast. The longer I do this, the better I get at finding guests, and the more amazing people find me and ask to guest. So enjoy my conversation with Wes Cuprill, and I hope you laugh as hard as we did throughout. Listen now. Today's guest has an agent. That often means a person is very accomplished or very busy. In Wes's case, the agent used some interesting words that caught my attention. Let me read their words. Wes, have you heard these words, Wes?
I have
Wes is
not, no.
Wes is a financial advisor who takes a unique personal approach to women, specifically women who find themselves suddenly single, to help them with their personal finances, retirement planning, investments, and more. Suddenly single is not unique at this time of our life. Your partner, spouse may have a health issue that claims their life, or we all know that gray divorce is at an all-time high. Now, a true confession. I clicked on Wes's profile and he's male and young. But I have enough episodes under my belt about ageism and sexism that I got off my judgy high horse and booked him. You
I've got
see,
some gray hair coming in at least.
we need to update that profile picture then. Anyways, his profile states, with a deep understanding of the unique financial challenges women face, Wes provides holistic and tailored advice, especially to those navigating difficult transitions such as divorce or the loss of a spouse. He must know his stuff, and I have my list of questions. Are you ready to meet him? Wes Cuprill, welcome to the Boomer Woman's Podcast.
Thank you very much, Agnes. I'm very excited to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. Now, I mentioned your age. My apologies. Thank you for laughing. You had a good mentor, I take it.
I did, yes. My dad, Dan. So I am the mini me version of him. I just kept my hair, at least. But Dad has done this now for 26, 27 years, something like that. So I have learned from the best. So while I may be young, our combined expertise is well over 40 years, 35 years, something like that. And so we've got a lot under our belts collectively, and he's taught me a lot.
Now, what brought you into the fold?
What brought me in, I always said I was never going to do this. And after a few years working in the corporate world, doing something completely different, I was in supply chain and then sales for a medical company. I started thinking, you know what, I'm not really fulfilled in this line of work. And, was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And that's when Dad said, do you want to come work for me? And I gave it some thought about, joining the financial advisory world and realized, you know what, I do enjoy working with individual people and helping them. I get a lot of satisfaction when somebody meets with me and leaves feeling better than when they came in. So that's what drew me this direction, and it's been a great ride ever since.
Now, are women your bailiwick, or does your whole firm focus on women's financial issues?
Yeah, so the whole firm has shifted its focus to being primarily focused on women. Now, we don't just work with women. We have over 300 client families across the United States, but our messaging now is primarily focused on women. And a lot of it comes from the story of my grandmother, actually. By her own admission, money was always a bit of a struggle for my grandmother. She had kids very young, was divorced very young, and honestly, by way of a bad alimony deal from her first marriage, she kind of felt it necessary financially to get remarried. Now, she stayed married to my step grandfather Ken for a very long time, but he recently died, and now Grandma finds herself a widow. So, just given all of her struggles, especially financially, it really inspired my dad first to say, you know what? I want to work with women to help them achieve a secure financial future, give them the retirement that they not only want, but that they also deserve. And then with me joining the firm, I've really enjoyed that work as well, and have really made it a passion of mine. And the more and more that I've dove into the, I can never figure out that
Divin.
verb, divin, yeah, into the world of helping women with finance, there's a huge need. And I'll be the first one to say the financial advising industry has, in my opinion, failed women tremendously. And while I may not be able to change the overall industry, I can at least do my part individually to help women plan for retirement and give them a financial planning firm that focuses on them and their needs.
Well, coming at you from this time of life, like my age, many women my age, midlife women, whatever, have the experience where the man in their life made the investment decisions and hired the financial advisor, who was mostly a man, and they talked over and around her. Do you still see that, or is it starting to change?
100%. Now I'll get it out of the way. Yes, I am a man. There's nothing I can do about that. I'm staying a man. But when it comes to how we can change things, we're doing everything we can. I do believe the industry is still predominantly masculine, not just in the people who work in it, but the language that they use. I mean, many times you'll hear sports metaphors or they'll just talk about the numbers. And yes, we do sense that they're talking over the wife in many of the conversations. Many advisors we've worked with will actively say they don't like working with women. Not only is that statement just absurd and sexist at the end of the day, our best clients are women. If we had our preference, we would only work with the women in every family. You know, they're the easiest to work with, the most empathetic, and we really just enjoy their presence more, to be completely honest with you. But sorry, I kind of drifted off there in terms of
No, I think you did
talking
answer
about
it.
that. But yeah, it's just ultimately I get kind of angry when I think about how the financial advising industry has treated women. And yes, going back to what you were saying, a lot of times we find that it was the man who handled a lot of the finances in a relationship. And whether through divorce or widowhood, a woman finds themselves suddenly single, there's a void that they have. So what is it? It's a crazy high statistic. The number of women who will leave a financial advisor within the first year of divorce or their husband dying because that advisor was terrible at communication or they just didn't have a good rapport with the woman originally. And then on top of that, they just don't have a good grasp on all the finances that they had. So it's our job to really help educate them and be kind of that empathetic voice that puts women's needs first.
I've had some financial advisors say that they like working with women because women will admit what they don't know, whereas traditionally, and it sounds sexist, and we're not going to that place, but often
Sure.
men will try to, save face perhaps when they don't understand, but they won't admit they don't understand.
That's a very good point, and you're absolutely correct
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. Now, if you have a man come into the office who has a spouse, but he doesn't seem to want to include her, is there anything you can say to change his mind, or do you just have to go with what they're offering?
Ooh. If there is enough of a block in that relationship and we can't kind of coach them through that,
Mhm.
we're probably not going to work with them. A lot of our job is around the psychology of money. I think the overall strategies of investing and what to put your money in, I don't necessarily think you need someone like me for that. If you just have a grasp on the numbers and want to do that, a lot of the value in what we bring is helping with the emotional side of things and coaching individuals and couples through many of the emotional pieces that come with money and investing. So if we do meet with a couple where the husband seems to have a strong control over the finances and has no desire to have his wife involved, we'll try and coach them through that. But if it ultimately means a detriment to the financial plan we put into place, we may ultimately decide we're not the right fit for those people.
What are the emotions around money? I mean, I'm from the generation you don't talk about money or sex, I mean. But does that still exist quite a
One
bit?
of the biggest emotions, at least when it comes to working with women, is a question, and it is, will I be okay? And let me take a step back here. When we work with clients, we'll often ask them the question of, what does a fully funded retirement mean to you? One in which, hypothetically, you run zero risk of outliving your money. When we ask that question of men, we'll get answers like, it means we get to pay down all of our debt, buy a new house, take a vacation every year. Nothing wrong with these answers, but they're tangible. We can put a dollar amounts on them and say, okay, here's how much you have, here's how much you need, here's how you get there. But when we ask that question of women, we'll get answers like, it means financial independence, it means freedom, it means I won't be a burden on my children. And what I love about those answers is, while they're intangible, it means that money means a lot more to women. They place a lot more value to it. So they want to know, am I going to be okay? And that's really, I think, what a lot of the emotion is around. And it's our job to help them move forward with confidence.
So oftentimes, I'm in Canada, you're in the US. I think we're fairly similar, but oftentimes
Mm-hmm.
there'll be that number. You have to have $1 million or something in investments to draw a reasonable income off of. But like that number is, unless you're pretty much there, it's hard to attain. And there's workarounds. You don't need $1 million, do you?
No, no. In fact, we've seen many people retire without $1 million. But in terms of talking about what exactly is that right number, we actually just had a woman client in the other day who isn't really concerned about the overall number that she has. It's just, will I be able to do the charitable giving that I want? Will I be able to leave something behind to everybody? Am I going to be able to do all the things that I want to do? She's not necessarily concerned about the dollar number associated with that. It's, am I living in my means, and will I be okay? And we're able to help her answer that effectively. In fact, one of our best kind of examples of really helping somebody with the emotion was a client that, she unfortunately died a few years ago, but when she first met with us, had a lot of concerns about the future. Spent a little too much time probably watching cable news, by her own admission, and lived in a lot of fear of what the future had to hold. And a lot of what we did was around kind of behavioral work, getting her to not, look at the news and realize, okay, tomorrow is not the end of the world. And over time, she was able to do more and more of the things on her bucket list. Unfortunately, wasn't able to do them all, just given the fact she passed away. But I think that was really kind of fulfilling for us to be able to help somebody overcome those fears. That's really the biggest emotion, fear.
What about the fact now that we're all living longer? I always say I come from a
Yeah.
long line of long livers, and I must admit, when I consult with my financial advisor, who I love and who's wonderful, um,
Don't
uh,
worry, I'm not going to pitch you.
no, I'm just because we're good. My next question is going to be,
Okay.
anyway, we talk about the fact that, like to draw an income so that I live comfortably right now,
Yes.
like, do I have to be dead by 102?
So
You know,
longevity is a huge concern, and women on average live about 6 years longer than men, at least here in the United States. I'm not sure if that is the same in Canada, but longevity risk means you have to plan differently. It's one thing for me to put together a plan for somebody who's going to live 20 years, but for 26 years, that's a considerably longer amount of time. And so as a result, we can't just use a one size fits all approach to everybody. We don't believe in cookie cutter approaches. So whenever somebody comes in, we wipe the slate clean and build a plan around them and their individual needs. And most of the time, if it's a woman we're talking with, it's taking a looking at things longer and saying, okay, we know your money is going to have to stretch further. What does that mean? Now, again, that's a number, so I can drill down to that, but then it's translating into, will you be okay? Yes, yes, you will.
well, I think too, I mean, you're talking 26 years. At age 60, a woman could have another 40 years ahead of her.
Absolutely. That was
Yeah,
just an
yeah,
example
yeah,
at the end
yeah.
of the
So,
day. But yeah, it's definitely a big concern, especially since Social Security was not meant to account for that here in the United States.
Well, we'll
When
get to
it
that again. You're
okay,
you're segueing into all my questions.
I'll save
Yeah.
that for later, but yeah, that's another one.
Okay, but let's go with that whole advisor topic now. More and more women have their own money. They want to do their own thing. They want their own advisor, like even if they're in a
Yep.
marriage. What do you suggest they look for in an advisor?
I suggest first and foremost they find somebody who's not going to use any type of cookie cutter approach, somebody who is holistic in their approach. So, for example, we are financial planners first. We build a specific financial plan for somebody and only recommend things that fit that plan. There's a lot of people out there who will call themselves advisors, but many times they're just leading with a single product here and there. You need to find somebody who's holistic and looks at everything within your specific financial situation. On top of that, I would also ask them for examples in their own practice of successful outcomes for women clients. If they can't specifically provide you examples, they may not be the best fit for you. Because I think you want to find an advisor who has a good track record of working with women if that's something that you value.
Well, isn't it true also that if I come to you, you will in fact be my employee. So if you're not going to be a good fit for what I need, I shouldn't hire you.
Absolutely. Our whole goal is for it to be a long-term, if not multi-generational relationship. So you want somebody who is not just good fit for you, who you actually like. In fact, one of our own criteria for people who we bring on as clients is they need to be likable. Because we'll play golf with them, we'll go out to dinner with clients. We see them many times out of the office. Many clients we hope to call friends, and so that means a lot. And again, with women valuing things differently than men, I think relationships being something that women value a lot. You want somebody who you like.
Yeah, and I know there's a number of times when I have said to my advisor, okay, just go over that again because I'm one of these people that the curtain closes and she's really, really good at sort of drawing it back carefully and not moving on until she thinks I've got a grasp on it. But yeah, just someone who
Yes,
doesn't mind doing that, I'm sure.
it's a good balance between being patient and educational without sounding condescending.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's a delicate thing to do, but it's possible, and you need to find somebody who can do it.
Yeah, yeah. Now you
Yeah.
have a talking point, and I mentioned it in my intro. What makes retirement planning for women distinct from men? You use that word distinct, and why is it essential for women? Now, maybe you've answered that with because the guys are about the numbers and the women are about the intangibles. But
Yes.
is that the
That
distinction?
is that is the biggest distinction. It's the answer to that question of what does a retirement mean to you, fully funded one. So as a result of that, I can put together a plan that says, here's how much money you have. How much do you want? Okay, that much. Here's what you need to do in the interim to get to there. And I can assign a dollar value very easily. But it's a completely different thing to say, okay, what do you want from retirement? And that being financial freedom, the ability to give back, time spent with family, et cetera, et cetera. There's not a dollar value associated with that. Many of those things are priceless, if you will. So instead, I need to put together a plan for women that says, okay, are you going to be okay? Are you going to be able to do all of those various things? Ultimately, yes, there is a dollar value that does get assigned to that. But with women, we need to put it together a plan that says, okay, you're going to be able to do all of those things that you want to do in retirement.
Okay. Are there any mistakes, shall we say, that women make when they're planning for retirement?
I think one of the biggest mistakes we find is not taking enough risk. Women statistically are a little bit more risk averse than men when it comes to investing. And if you aren't exposed to enough risk, you will be missing out on some growth as a result of that, especially because inflation can eat away at much of your savings if it's at least not keeping up with that. So that's probably the single mistake that I could attach without getting too generalized, if you will.
I know when I was younger, I was much more willing to take more risk. As I get
Yes.
older, I'm less willing to risk all the work I've put
Absolutely,
into
and
it.
that's a conversation that we have with everybody, and becomes more of a men and women type of thing. Early on, we want to educate everybody in taking on as much risk as they possibly can, especially if they don't need that money in the interim. But when it comes to somebody who's in or nearing retirement, there is a factor in there that is not talked about a lot that we actually try and educate people on as much as possible, and that's volatility. So when we talk about investments, we often talk about average return. You tell somebody you're going to average 8% in return over the next 40 years, that's fantastic. They don't care that in 1 year they're up 50, next year they're down 30. They just care that over 40 years it's 8%. But for someone who's in nearing retirement, the amount of that volatility, that up and down, can have drastic consequences. I won't go the exact math behind it, but for someone who is, say, achieving 6% in average return annually, but a standard deviation, so a very little volatility, can actually have more money after 10 years than somebody who has 8% in return, but a huge amount of volatility, assuming both are withdrawing from their accounts. There's a lot of math. I hate going into the math because I think people glaze over a little bit, but that's a very important exercise to educate people on. That the closer you are to retirement, you need to understand what the volatility of your portfolio is. And if you don't, it could actually be hurting you in the long run.
Well, I remember in the like 2007-8 stuff that was happening. I had an employer equal contribution thing. And when I'd get my
Mm-hmm.
statements, I wouldn't even open them. I'd throw them in a drawer and say, whatever's lost was just my employer's money. It wasn't mine. It was just total denial. I didn't want to look at the
Unfortunately,
numbers.
yeah, those years were in what we would call the third standard deviation of expected returns. So you won't see those often. But
Yay.
unfortunately, yeah, that was a tough time for everybody, to say the
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, women are the child bearers, often the
Mm-hmm.
child carers,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the parent carers, which
At a
will
much higher rate than
often,
men.
yeah, which will often mean time out from the workplace, which is their best contributing time.
Mm-hmm.
How do you buffer that?
I'm not really sure there. Well, I'm not sure if there is a way to buffer that, if you will. I don't have an effect over the macro
Yeah.
issue behind all of that, but it is an aspect that has to be considered when planning for retirement. We do need to recognize that a woman may have fewer financial resources and less time to accumulate those resources than others might have. And so those are unexpected pieces that we would factor into somebody's long-term financial plan, especially parental care, because we're working more with people who are in or nearing retirement, so they have older parents. That's typically the case that we would see. So that long-term care actually gets factored into this person's financial plan. And you say, okay, expenses might be higher for a couple of years because you're caring for a parent. What does that look like on your own financial plan? I mean, so we factor that in. That may be something that's overlooked normally, but we take a look at that.
Well, and I think from a personal experience, you can't overemphasize just how expensive that gets, whether
No, you
it's
can't.
time off work or driving them from here to there with expensive gas and everything else, or all the
Yeah,
modifications you make to your home when they move in, so
absolutely.
it's,
It's not
yeah.
just the cost of the care itself; it's the opportunity costs that are also layered in. So it's a complex equation, and more than just a simple x plus y equals z. You really have to have a complex plan that factors that in.
Yeah. Now we use the words suddenly single, just use air quotes there.
Mm-hmm.
What is the process when a woman unexpectedly finds herself single? How do you get sort of an overview of what currently exists and figure out what happens next?
So I think it's threefold here. When it comes to divorcees, there's two different times at which they could find themselves suddenly single: pre-divorce, so they're just now initiating the process, or post-divorce. For somebody who is in the stages of divorce, that's actually where we would love to start to work with them, because The biggest thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that a 50-50 split doesn't necessarily mean a 50-50 split. Great example of that would be around real estate. They were not a client of ours, but there's an example we have of a woman who got stuck with 50% of a building that her husband had purchased during the marriage. It was an empty warehouse that ultimately had no economic value. And she thought, okay, I'm just getting a 50-50 split. Now she's stuck paying a massive tax bill on it every single year. When in truth, really what she would rather have had is something else to offset that asset, maybe even taken less in the overall divorce, but something that doesn't have a tax hit. So that process for somebody who is getting divorced, it's really taking a look at, okay, what are all the marital assets and helping them come to a settlement that is beneficial for them. For someone who's post-divorce, it's helping them really unravel the, I don't think there's anything there's such a thing as a clean divorce. So it's helping them kind of unravel all of it at the very end and say, okay, this is what you have. Let's go ahead and put you on a plan to a secure financial future through what you have existing. For somebody who is widowed, that one starts with a lot of empathy. We have to recognize that this is an extremely overwhelming time for somebody who has just lost their spouse. So most of the time, it's not even looking at the money first. It's making sure all of their emotional needs are met. If there's anything that we can do to help outside of just the financial planning. And then it's helping them understand what all they have and then deciding, okay, where do you want to go from here? And do you have what's necessary to get there? If not, let's help you put a plan into place to get there.
That must really tax your empathy, because not only do they maybe not have any idea what's been going on, but they're also grieving.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't speak to it more than just, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But it's one of the things that drives me in this. I think I said it earlier. One thing that really drives me is helping people and helping them feel better than when they walked in. If I'm doing that, then I'm getting satisfaction. I'm doing my job. And that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
You know, I'm meeting many of these people on their worst times of their lives. So what can I do to help them?
Yeah. Now you use one example. An example that I'm aware of is a couple divorcing, messy divorce, and he dragged it out so that he had the most available time to make sure she didn't get very much, shall we say.
Yep.
Is there any, I don't know, like, and I'm not dissing men, like, let's just get that clear right off the top. It was
No,
just
you're good.
one incident that well, I'm saying for my audience as much as anything. I don't want men going, yeah, okay, well. Anyways, is there any way around that? Like, if she comes to you early enough in the divorce process?
Certainly. You know, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to speak to any of the
Okay, yeah,
legal aspects of it. But as an advisor, we believe in having a team if you can afford to do so. Because that, you know, while the attorney is focused on just the divorce proceedings, financial advisor may be able to help you untangle all the financial pieces of it. All of that has to be, you know, public record. Sometimes the husband will try and hide things. In fact, that's what happened in the example that I gave you. The wife actually had to go out and find a forensic accountant. So that would have been beyond what we would have been able to help with. But that is certainly something that we could initiate and go, something's not right here. We need to dig deeper. You know, a lot of times people are emotionally overwhelmed when they're going through divorce. So you want to have as many people in your corner who are going to help you uncover things that you may not have thought of because you're dealing with so many other things.
right. I think the thing that got me in the case of my example, and it didn't matter whether, it doesn't matter which spouse is trying to hide stuff,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
when you're trying to screw your spouse out of money that you've collected over the last 25 years together, how do you face your kids and say, oh yeah, guess what I managed to do to your other parent? Like, it's like, holy crikey.
Yeah, I could probably go on a while and it's outside the topic of this conversation, but the emotional piece and what you realize about other people,
Yeah.
heck, in this family situation, the husband's actions. I mean, I had known this family since I was a kid, and I was
Wow.
just
Oh,
bewildered. by the situation. I'm like, oh my goodness, how does that happen? And just you think you know somebody ultimately,
Yeah,
but you
yeah.
don't. Yeah, it's a shame.
I know when my former husband and I were divorcing, my lawyer actually said, if you're going to walk with nothing, I'm not your lawyer. If you're going to try to screw him out of everything, I'm not your lawyer. If you're willing to do this completely reasonably and equitably, I'm your lawyer.
Sure.
So
Probably a good middle ground, despite
yeah.
how messy it is. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
okay, so our audience is mostly mid-age women. They'll be
Mhm.
leaving the workforce in, say, the next 10 years.
Mhm.
If they don't have like a good savings plan already in place, is it too late, or is there things you can do to?
No, I don't think it's ever too late. There's always an opportunity to start. What's past is past, but you'd certainly be playing catch up. So, we believe in being candid and keeping expectations and goals realistic. But no, it's definitely not too late to start. And that's, part of the conversation is taking a look at how much time you have left. What could you possibly put away? Maybe telling somebody to save a little bit more than they have been. There's strategies that we can employ.
And I guess too, it becomes then a reality. Like if someone, this might be, I'm segueing into my own next question. I'm like, but if somebody doesn't have a lot, but they think they'll do a lot after retirement, they need to modify their expectations a little bit.
We do, yeah. That's a difficult conversation. No one ever likes hearing that their dreams aren't attainable, if you will. But we would be remiss if we were trying to tell somebody that they could do something that they can't do. I mean, that's outside of our fiduciary duty. It's our duty to make sure that we keep goals realistic and tell somebody ultimately, no, you can't do that. As hard as that might be, ultimately, that is us being somebody's best advisor.
Yeah. Now you started to go there earlier in our conversation, and now it appears in my notes, so we're going to do it. But I've noticed several times, unfortunately, it wasn't a one-off, where women who retire never realized that their retirement income wouldn't pay the bills. So, like in Canada, we've got our old age security, we've got our Canada pension plan, which is like what your employer pays into over your working years.
Yeah,
But put the two of them together, especially in this day and age, in this economy, there is no way that'll pay the bills.
I forget the stat off the top of my head, but the majority of people who think that Social Security is going to cover them end up below the poverty line when they previously weren't before
Yeah.
retirement because they think that it's going to buoy them. Speaking to Social Security directly, I mean, it's a broken system and I have no idea what's going to happen to it. I have a feeling my generation won't see a dime from it. When it first started, the age of collection was 65, but the average lifespan was 62. So they didn't expect most people to collect on it. And on top of that, 42 people were paying in for every one person receiving benefits. Now I think it's up to 79, 80 is the average life expectancy, and only three people are paying in for every one person collecting benefits. So the system it's been a serious world of hurt. I think the trust is supposed to run out sometime in 2030, somewhere in there. That's the trust fund that has all of the reserves for Social Security. So when it comes down to the income that you're going to have, you have to have other things in place. Whether that is an annuity if you want something that's fixed, or it is taking a look at other investment vehicles to allow your money to grow, you're going to have something to supplement your income if you want to maintain your existing lifestyle in retirement.
Well, I know in the last, say, 2 years, there's been in the news, that one country or another is going to change the retirement age to say age 62 from age 60. And I'm
Yeah.
going like, holy crikey, I would have loved to have that be the retirement age when I could start drawing on everything. But I think too, being of this age and talking to so many people this age, whether it's through podcasts or just my own circle, is more and more people have no intention of leaving the workforce anyways. And even if they change what they're doing, so this career, they can walk away from that, but they're going to start looking for other things. So they're going to have
Mm-hmm.
that supplemental income. Now, the other side of the coin, which creates a lot of argument in a lot of places is it seems to me that with the computer systems we've got right now, that if someone's making, they my generation apparently has more wealth than ever before in the history of the world. And
Hmm.
so do all of us need to be drawing on the public system? Or, which, especially in a country like Canada, that's just a really volatile conversation.
God bless the politician willing to run on that. Because honestly, I think the biggest issue is it's political suicide for anybody who decides to mess with Social Security at the moment. But ultimately, that may be the way that fixes it. I mean, again, I think it was originally intended as the widows and like disabled children or something fund back in the day when it started, I think in 1937. It was for women who found themselves suddenly single and children who were orphans or disabled. It was not meant originally to be a retirement plan. So I think what you're alluding to is perhaps we disqualify some people from collecting, those who don't necessarily need it. And that might be something that ends up happening. I don't know how that works, though. That would be interesting. Yeah. Ultimately, something drastic will have to happen. Now, I think term limits in the United States would end up getting implemented before anybody runs on that. But you're right. Something will have to happen. Otherwise, it's going to implode on itself.
Yeah, well,
Call me a cynic, but it's true. That's what
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, ultimately, politicians I don't think have our best interests in mind. But I digress.
There we go. I was just going to say that's a whole nother podcast episode. We could
Yeah,
get
oh yeah,
really political. Yeah, I guess the
absolutely.
reason that sticks with me, just that whole fact that, as I say, my circle are mostly women, that they don't realize is, first of all, in Canada, you can find out before you retire how much you're going to make each month. I don't
You
know if you can
can
do
here
that in this.
too.
Yeah,
No, you
yeah.
can.
But,
Yeah,
people either don't realize it or they don't bother because they just think that, oh no, like, get the pensions, it'll be fun, it'll be fine, I won't have to work. But I've seen women having to sell cars, having to sell houses, that sort of stuff
yeah.
because of the grim reality.
In the States, we have a horrible lack of awareness around, and I'm not blaming individuals per se, I'm blaming
Mhm.
the education system
Oh yeah,
in
yeah.
teaching people how to be aware of finance. We treat it as a taboo, if you will. You don't talk about money, but then, we don't teach basic financial skills. It's something that I ultimately took for granted, being the son of a financial advisor, but I'm realizing education is something that is desperately needed just to teach everybody exactly what it means and what. Yeah, sorry, it's one of those things that kind of gets me angry at the end of the day that we're failing generations of people in this endeavor. How that changes, I don't know, but I hopefully something does.
The education system has never addressed things
No,
financial. I mean, in my day, I had to figure out how to write a check by myself. Nowadays, like the younger generations, they get a credit card. And well, even I did when I was young. First credit card, boom, it's all money. Oh, I have to pay it back. You know, you just don't
that one is
learn that stuff.
terrifying.
Yeah,
Consumer debt, I think, topped 2 trillion recently in the
yeah,
United States. I mean, and that's at 20% interest at best. It's terrifying. It is.
yeah.
So, that's why at least in our company, one person at a time, we try and help. I can't change the whole system, but I can at least do my part here.
Okay, so now that we've totally depressed our audience, I'm going to take us even further down that rabbit hole. You have a resource called Retirement Rescue: 7 Lessons to Save Your Retirement, in which you say 7 insightful lessons to help you rescue your retirement from the forces that await. And I feel like I should have dramatic music coming in here. What are the forces that await retirement?
The forces that await retirement, I will have to apologize. That was a book written by Dad and is kind of a legacy material. So I don't know exactly what they are off the top of my own head. Shame on me. However, I do know one of the biggest things. It's taxes. Taxes are what we would call the ticking time bomb that threatens your retirement. Most people now have their retirements in a 401k or some type of tax deferred vehicle. And so their net worth now is not what their true net worth is going to be because you still have to pay tax on all of that money that you have saved. I have a very good feeling tax rates are going to rise in the future. They have to. The debt has ballooned and we're going to have to pay for it one way or another. The easiest way to do that is to start taxing people, especially retirements. So tax rates will go up. So there's strategies that you can employ now to save your retirement. The easiest one is a Roth conversion, converting money from a traditional IRA into a Roth IRA. But that really is the biggest thing that we try and save people's retirements from. It's taxes, because you just don't know what the future has in store for you when it comes tax time. So is there a way that we can help protect you now?
This is just out of the blue. As you were talking, it occurred to me
Mm-hmm.
that is there any way to create a course or something that you could take your clients through, say, pre-election? So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, obviously you've got a new president coming in January. We've got a new prime minister coming in within the next year. So nothing's, I hope, going to change snap overnight, but market forces are already being affected because of like your latest election. The same thing will
Yeah.
happen in Canada when we elect a new prime minister or the next prime
Mm-hmm.
minister. And is there any way to prepare people for what to look for in the case of changes to government?
It's a very timely question for you to ask. I just did a podcast episode about that.
Oh, okay.
Yes, the impact of an election on your retirement. I think that was actually the title of it. Came out last week. And I talk about the impact of an election, both leading up to it and afterwards. What's very interesting, a lot of people think that an election year is incredibly tumultuous and leads to a lot of uncertainty. And depending on who wins or loses, the market's going to crash or skyrocket. History says something completely different. In fact, there's only been, I believe, 4 down years after an election going back to 1926. Four. And those were, I believe, 1920 something, 1930s, and then 2000 and 2008. Those were all dominated by economic depression or recession. Dot-com boom, 2008, and then the 1930s. So there were other forces at play. But in every other election year, the market went up, and in most cases, substantially. So it's an interesting kind of lesson in psychology that a lot of people think that the election is going to have a huge impact on the market, when in truth, it actually doesn't really care who's president. Whether under a conservative or a liberal leader in office, the market still kind of does its own thing. I'm still a firm believer in the invisible hand of the market to an extent. Yes, I do believe there's some crony things happening in the background, but ultimately, when it comes to an election year, it's not as crazy as I think as a lot of people think. I can't tell the future, but history does tell a different story.
So it comes down to that whole, I was going to say theory, but it's not even a theory, where like an investment is a long-term vehicle. So
It
yeah,
is.
I mean, you may crash and burn in, next year, but if you're in it for the next 30, 40 years or even 20 years, things balance out.
And it's the importance of having a plan in place. So anytime we have a client who comes to us because the market has taken a sharp downturn, we have to tell them we've accounted for these possible sharp downturns. You're still well within the variability that we have accounted for. If you have a plan in place, you can weather any storm that comes your direction, because markets have traditionally continued to always go up. But it just speaks to you have to have a plan in place. You can't be reactionary to every single thing that happens. I mean, just one day out of the market on the S&P's best day can mean you average less than half the return of somebody who stayed in the market for the long term.
Is that another good reason to have a planner slash advisor? Because you know, I look at
Certainly, I will absolutely say yes.
well, no, I know people that they check their stock portfolio like every day, twice a day. And I mean, they have conniptions if it goes down and they're celebrating if it goes up. And I personally, my heart couldn't handle that.
We still have clients who do look at it every day. Everybody has their own motivations for working with an advisor, whether it's somebody who tracks it every day or wants nothing to do with it whatsoever. The one thing that I will tell somebody though who likes to track their positions every day, you haven't lost anything until you sell. So while you may be down $20 on a day, when did you first buy in? If you bought at 100, it was at 200, now it's at 180, you haven't lost $20. You're still up $80. So people need to realize that until you sell it, you haven't lost anything. It's all on paper. And that's if you want your blood pressure to go down, stop checking your stock values, especially if you're not retired. If you're still working, it doesn't matter. You can't access it. That money means nothing. And if it goes down, that's actually a great opportunity to buy more if you have cash on hand. I can go on about that for a while, but that's definitely one of the biggest emotions. And we're like, if you want to be happier, stop looking at it. That and stop watching cable news.
You
Left
sound
or
like
right, both. Yeah, both channels are terrible.
yeah. You sound like my previous financial advisor, and the only reason she's previous is because she passed. But yeah, it's just like just close the paper, Agnes.
Oh yeah, you have to. I mean, seriously, because they'll have you thinking the market's going to crash, the world's going to end. But if you go outside, the sky's still blue, it's
Yeah,
still up there. So
that's one of my favorite sayings is the sky has not fallen. Ah, dear.
exactly.
Okay, let's get into something cheerful now, besides our bad jokes. What are what is a holistic approach to financial planning?
A holistic approach is one that takes a look at not just the numbers, but every aspect of your financial well being. So we don't just look at investments or just at insurance. We package it all together to ensure that everything is working as it should. If someone's not holistic, what they might do is say, hey, you should buy this annuity. Because as you come to find out, they carry a large commission, and that's all that this advisor does. But for us, we build a plan first, and then we only make recommendations that fits that plan. So if the plan says not to invest their money with us, we'll tell them that, and they may not end up working with us with the implementation because it didn't fit that plan. We won't recommend an annuity because it doesn't fit that plan. But then on top of it too, we're not just here for the numbers piece of things. We'll help clients buy cars. We'll help them organize funeral arrangements if they need to. We're more than just numbers people. We are there to help with the emotional aspect of things and kind of, be there with family. I think that sounds cliche, and some people might be like, yeah, whatever. But that's really what we mean by being holistic, is helping you financially, not just with one investment, but with all of them, and then helping you outside the investments any way we can.
Well, what haven't we talked about that you want mid-aged women to think about, consider?
I think women are often thinking of others. They are wired to put their children's needs and their family's needs above their own. And the one thing that I would always encourage a woman to do is take time to think about themselves, where they currently are, and what they want from the future. It's important to just have that conversation with yourself every now and then. And if you have uncertainty about where you're headed, find somebody who can help you put a plan in place to ensure that you are okay. I think that's the biggest message that I have.
So it's sort of like being in an airplane. When something goes wrong, you put your oxygen mask on yourself first, and then you can help other people.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Take some time to ensure that you are okay, because ultimately, as long as if you're okay, then you can help others to the best of your extent.
Yeah. As this conversation goes live, we're in the depths, it's a hard word to say, of the gifting season. Any
Yes.
thoughts there?
In what way?
Well, we've talked about the size of personal debt and stuff like that. Women are caring people who think of others. It sounds like a fairly easy way to go into debt just because it's the gifting season.
I would say avoid all the layaway deals that might be there. It's one way to avoid debt, certainly. But I don't know, maybe it's a conversation around truly understanding what the gifting season is about and maybe shifting approaches to be less materialistic and focus more on, the spirit of the whole thing. I know within my family, I like giving gifts more than I like receiving, but I think ultimately everybody who is in my close circle values time spent with others than the physical gifts that we might give each other. So maybe that's the biggest thing to remember. Stay present and spend time with each other. That might be the best thing this season, especially given how divisive everything has been, at least here in the States over the last few months, given the election. Hopefully we start coming back together a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. I know in the last few years, I mean, maybe I learned from my mother who was an avid knitter, but oh my goodness, some of the sweaters that my children wore once to show her and never touched again. Like so and I'm the same with both my children and my grandchildren is like I don't have a clue what you want or what the style is or what your favorite game is, all that sort of stuff. So I know I tend to gift experiences.
I love that.
Whether we go, to whatever and do it together, or I take the grandchildren or something. But it's
Yeah,
just so much easier.
it is. It is. And I think you remember them too.
Yeah.
Every travel that I've done, I try to do experiences when I'm there, and that's what I remember the most. Yeah,
Yeah.
not some item that I got passed. So
Well, I must admit, I think my children remember some of those sweaters. I'm sorry, Mom, up there wherever you are. I'm sorry. Oh my goodness. I think she was colorblind. Oh. Anyways, okay, where do we find you on the World Wide Web?
Easiest place to find me is moneyandclarity.com. That'll take you to our website. We've got some resources on there. You can get copies of our books, Suddenly Single, that I've talked about,
Okay.
and as well as find a link to my calendar if you'd like to book time with me. But moneyandclarity.com.
Okay, and I will just expand on that a little bit. You've got the two resources. One is specifically for widows, one's specifically for divorced women.
Correct. Yes.
Are you on social?
We are on Facebook, but we aren't on Instagram or anything
All the
like
rest
that.
of them. Okay, not on
Yeah.
Blue Sky yet. Okay,
No.
you have a podcast. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Wealthwise Women podcast. We started that a few months ago now. And what it is, it's a weekly show dedicated to discussing topics of personal finance and how they affect women in particular. So I'll take the approach of talking about, say, maybe a general topic, or I'll discuss something that is more recent, like I discussed the impact of an election on your retirement. So far, it's been mostly monologues of me, but we hope to grow it into interviews and see where it goes from there.
Cool. May I ask you a personal question before we close?
Absolutely.
You've already done the segue into this at the very beginning. Who came up with the term the clone with hair?
I don't know exactly where that came from. I'm guessing from my dad. He was the first person to say it, but we have the exact same mannerisms, and the way we talk is you could close your eyes and not be able to discern the two. So I'm very much his clone, but I kept all of my hair and he's bald.
So, of course, this is the Boomer Woman's podcast. I have to ask you if that's your mom's strong genetics.
Yes, it is. It is my mother's strong genetics. Yes, and grandfather on her side, he's pushing 80, late 80s, and still has a full head of hair.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
Okay, seeing as how that was too easy, what's the university or whatever it is on the background behind you on the wall?
that is Indiana University. I am a proud alum, and this year we are doing very well in football, which is very rare for us. So I'm a very proud fan at the moment.
Okay, so right now it's only 2 feet by 2 feet. By the end of the season, it's going to be massive on the
Something
wall.
like that. Exactly. I'm even wearing it today.
Oh, you are. That's great.
Yes, I'm obnoxious at the moment. Yes.
Oh, one of those. Oh no.
I'm allowed to be. We are historically very bad in football, so
Oh,
it's
okay.
a rare feat, but take it when we can get it.
I think college, is it college football or university
It's
football?
it's university football. Yeah,
Okay. I think it's bigger in the States than it is up here in Canada.
it
So
is. Yes,
yeah,
yes,
because you
definitely
have more
U.S.
states.
A lot of schools. It's a big thing here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Great. Okay, your website link is in the show notes. All the links are on your page at our website.
Yep.
Listeners, I don't think you can have too much information when it comes to planning, especially financial planning as we get older. I know I've met a few planners who treated me like the little woman, that they knew better than I did. I'd like to hear your experiences, the good, the bad, and the laughable. So talk to us. Leave comments where you're listening, or if you're listening at boomwithabang.com, scroll to the bottom of the page and talk to us there. Maybe there's a question I didn't ask Wes. Ask it in the comments and I'll get you an answer. Share this episode. Information is power. Now I'm going to quote my mother, and she's going to strike me dead for sure. Information is power, or as my mother used to say, forewarned is forearmed. Your friends deserve both the power and the forewarning. Leave stars and reviews where you can. The algorithm goddesses love you for it, and I'll love you for it. You can support this podcast by buying me a coffee, pretty cheap option. That link is in the show notes and above Wes's head on his page at our website. I'm registered at Substack. You can follow there for free and get notified every time something goes live. Wes Cuprill, thank you for being my guest today and sharing so much really important information about the financial side of retirement planning and certainly giving us food for thought. And thank you for your sense of
Pleasure.
humor.
Absolutely. Pleasure was all mine. I greatly enjoyed this conversation, and thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
That's great. Have a good rest. Have a good rest. I'm not going to get this out. Have a great rest of week.
You as well. Thank you.
Thanks.